Hey everyone!
Hola a todos!
This is Jahaira.
And this is Stephanie, and welcome to Cuento Crimen podcast.
Y aquí on the Cuento Crimen podcast, we are a true crime podcast and we bring a new case every Wednesday.
Cada miércoles.
And these are cases that don't get much media attention, so chances are you haven't heard of some of these cases.
And we cover these cases in Spanglish.
Así que agarra a tu abuelita, tu abuelito, tu mamá, tu papá, a quien tú gustes, and come join us every Wednesday for a new true crime case.
El caso de Isabel nos lleva a Tucson, Arizona, en el año 2012. Isabel tenía 6 años y ella vivía con sus papás, Becky y Sergio.
Y ellos eran una familia contenta. From the research that we made, there wasn't really any red flags o algo que nos preocupó. Like, todo parecía que estaba bien entre la familia.
Yeah, todo parecía bien, and we weren't able to find the exact date of when this happened, except that it was during April 2012. But on this particular night, Isabel and her parents were getting ready for bed.
A Isabel le encantaban los deportes y resultaba que ella tenía un juego por la mañana. So parecía que la familia were kind of just taking an easy night, being chill, and calling it a day early just so Isabel could get a full night's sleep before her big game.
Yeah, so it makes sense that Isabel needed her energy, y entonces su mamá helps her to get ready for bed, and like she braids her hair, helps her change into her PJs, tucks her into bed, and all of this happens before 11 p.m.
Y ya que Isabel se durmió, Becky, su mamá, la dejó en su cuarto, and she made her way to the parents' bedroom a dormirse también ella.
Sergio, el papá de Isabel, se había quedado dormido en el sillón. And it sounds like he just kind of, knocked out, sleeping, was tired probably from the day, and he was just watching TV y se quedó ahí.
Que es algo muy común, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know my dad does that all the time. Y sometimes hasta le quiero apagar la televisión. He's like, no, I'm watching it.
Yes, they do that.
Sir.
Like, you are not watching.
Está más dormido que despierto. Pero ya, y entonces como a las 11 de la noche, ya todos en casa están dormidos, lights are off, and everything is peaceful.
The next morning, como a las 8 de la mañana, Sergio se levanta y va al cuarto de Isabel to wake her up and start getting her ready for her big game. But when he goes into her room, he is shocked. Isabel no está allí.
And so, trying not to panic, her family begins searching the entire house a ver si Isabel está por allí, right? A lo mejor se metió a otro cuarto o está en el baño. I don't know. They were just hoping that for some reason she would just show up in a random part of the house.
Pero después de buscarla por toda la casa, they realized that Isabel, isn't really there.
Y peor, el hermano de Isabel fue el que encontró la ventana del cuarto de Isabel abierta. And along with that, the protection screen was on the outside. And I think al ver esto, reality kind of starts to hit que algo pasó. And, the window was obviously like someone forced entry or Isabel left. I don't know. But all they know is that they see this part of the house and then Isabel is gone.
And so they waste no time in calling the police. And given the circumstances, la policía llega y empieza a hacer las búsquedas.
I'm glad that they didn't put any te tienes que esperar 24 horas or this and that. Like, they got to it. And this case pretty quickly got national attention. Isabel was all over the news. Her whole community was actively looking for her. Pero desafortunadamente, después de cada búsqueda, venían con las manos vacías.
Isabel was nowhere to be found, and there also wasn't any solid leads on her disappearance. And of course, with national attention, there's also endless theories. And one of those theories was that her father, Sergio, had something to do with it.
People didn't understand how someone could come into their home without Sergio hearing a single thing, right? Porque se supone que Sergio estaba dormido in the living room. And then they also questioned the fact that the family had 4 dogs. And so a lot of people were confused as to how did no one pick up a sign that something was happening in Isabel's room, right? Like, why didn't the dogs bark?
All valid questions, right? But for one, we don't know if the dogs did bark. Like, maybe they did, and, there's heavy sleepers in the house and no one really woke up. I know that I've done that before where like I hear a dog barking and I'm just like so tired and in my sleep and I'm like, it's fine, nothing's there, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that was the case too.
I mean, I do it too when our dog barks. I'm just like, Chico, duérmete. And also, like, if someone is willing to break into a home and kidnap a young girl, I want to assume that this person had it very well planned out, right? Like, sabe perfectamente lo que está haciendo. Entonces, a lo mejor esta persona los estaba espiando y ya sabía, like, what to do and what not to do and what's going to work best to get what they want.
Exactly. It's just a lot to think of. But Sergio siempre dijo que él no tuvo nada que ver con la desaparición de Isabel. And he kept true to his story.
And with Sergio clearing out, the police are left with no person of interest and no solid leads, really. And although Isabel's case remains open, it slowly starts becoming a cold case.
And we are going to pause real quick on Isabel. So Isabel went missing in 2012. And 2 years later, Maribel Gonzales, de 13 años, iba rumbo a casa de una amiga cuando desapareció el 3 de junio. And this is, 2 years after.
2 years, so in 2014. Y desafortunadamente, el cuerpo de Maribel fue encontrado near Trico and West Avra Valley Roads outside of Tucson. Y su cuerpo estaba metido debajo de unas llantas y le habían quitado la ropa y los zapatos.
Such a tragic story. El caso de Maribel soon became a cold case as well. They found her body, but they had no leads in who could have done this like horrible thing to her.
Y los años pasan, ¿verdad? Entonces, Isabel todavía está desaparecida y la persona responsable sobre el asesinato de Maribel is still out there. No one knows who this person is. And it wasn't until a few years later, in 2017, that things start to change.
An individual by the name Christopher Clements was arrested for burglary charges and was held at Pima County Jail.
And by the way, this was completely unrelated to Isabel and Maribel's case. Pero cuando los investigadores empiezan a investigar, they realize that Christopher is a lot more than what they initially thought.
So Christopher vivía con su prometida in East Elida Street, Tucson. And when the investigation initially started, all of Christopher's electronics were confiscated, and those were the first ties to Isabel and Maribel.
In his computer, they found so many disturbing things. To start off, they found child porn, along with sexually explicit photos involving children. And his Google searches were a little too specific to not have anyone question him.
We are going to kind of describe what they found, right? So some of his things that, he Googled were such as Isabel Celis sexy, and another was child killer found not guilty, another body found in desert, another one Arizona cold cases, and then there was also one de Keilani Tadeo, quien era una niña de 6 años que vivía en Hawaii, and she was raped and killed in 2001. And then another Dana Ireland autopsy photos. Again, she was a woman who was hit by a car while riding a bike in Hawaii in the year 1991. And she was kidnapped and raped antes de haber muerto del accidente.
I don't know. It just always amazes me how much a Google search can show. Because I feel like this has been in multiple cases. Like people just, who are guilty search like the most specific things.
Mm-hmm.
And so after seeing all the Google searches and after seeing all the pictures that he had in his computer, I think it was a little too obvious that he was tied to these crimes. Like here in his Google searches, you see Isabel's name and then you see 2 other names,
Mm-hmm. Los investigadores asked him about Isabel and they asked if he had any connections to her disappearance. Christopher dijo que él no había matado a Isabel, pero que él sabía dónde estaba su cuerpo.
Él les dijo a los investigadores que él les podía enseñar dónde estaba Isabel if they were to drop his other charges. Like, he was definitely smart about it and definitely trying to finesse the system.
Yes, he was trying to get something out of it before talking. Pero al mismo tiempo, you just kind of confessed, right, to revealing where Isabel is at, and like obviously there's gonna be more questions to it, like how do you know, like it's not just like, oh, I'll tell you that, like, oh, I'll tell you like the information you're looking for, but you're not gonna question me more about it. Like there's gonna be more questions.
The odds of you knowing where her body is, like her body, who's like she's been missing for years.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you pop up y les estás diciendo que tú sabes exactamente dónde está el cuerpo. How do you think like you're just going to be able to drop such a big bomb and then that's it? Like you're gone. Come on. I don't know. But whatever his thought process was, I'm glad that he spoke up because he did indeed lead investigators to the right place. They were able to find Isabel's body. El cuerpo de Isabel fue descubierto el 3 de marzo del 2017.
Her body was discovered around the area of Trico and West Avra Valley Roads, y él les dijo a los investigadores que él se acordaba exactamente dónde estaba porque había unas llantas de carros pretty nearby, and so that's how he remembered exactly where.
It was kind of like a landmark for the body type of thing. And for those of y'all who are connecting the dots, yes, those are the same tires where Maribel's body was found back in 2014.
What were the odds, right? But, Christopher kept denying that he kidnapped these two young girls. But, while this is happening, let's not forget that Christopher was being investigated for other cases.
He had a lot going on. And later, these other charges were dropped, but I guess some things overlapped. Entonces, los investigadores ya tenían unas cosas que trajeron más conexiones. I think a bit after his arrest, Christopher's significant other called the FBI to let them know certain things that Christopher had mentioned to her.
So it's like they're working up a case against him.
They are, yeah. And it's all unraveling super fast. And it's like pretty heavy things too.
Yeah. And I am super glad that this, significant other was able to call and, tell the FBI these things because, she had very valuable information to this case. Ella les dijo que Christopher had mentioned of maybe having some of Isabel's belongings buried in his backyard.
And obviously, again, this is like another big, like, flashing lights, right? He knows where the body is and now he's claiming que tiene cosas de Isabel buried in his backyard. Entonces, investigators lose no time y cuando los investigadores empezaron a buscar, they quickly discovered a plastic container que estaba enterrado y adentro de la caja estaba un suéter de una niña y también a homework packet que tenía el nombre Mercedes escrito por arriba.
Y Mercedes era el middle name de Isabel, which again, is this a big coincidence or like these things are adding up, right? So, with the searches on his computer, the homework package, and him just knowing where Isabel's body was at, like...
No, it's not a coincidence. Yes. It's like, come on, dude, like, you did something. And I wonder si él de veras creía que los investigadores no iban a poner dos y dos juntos. Like, come on, there's only one way that you knew where Isabel was. It was you. Like, you did that.
Y hay más. While they were investigating, encontraron que Christopher was a pen pal with another cellmate in Pima County. And this inmate had interesting information to share with the authorities.
His name was never announced, pretty sure, just to keep him safe. Pero él dice que Christopher le escribía hablando sobre el caso de Isabel. Y él decía que Christopher le dijo que Isabel was strangled and that chemicals were poured over her body.
He also told investigators that Christopher had mentioned how he wanted to get his car back from the police because it had a lot of evidence in his trunk.
I feel like this is low-key a confession, like without it being an actual confession. Like, no tenía sentido. Like, he's already told police so many other things, and now he's saying that there's even more evidence in his trunk. I don't know. I feel like it's a lot, Y también, Christopher compartió with this inmate que él tenía fotos de la casa de Isabel adentro de la Biblia que él tenía while he was in jail.
And that's strange, right? Like, it's weird. Why would you have, like, a picture of her house? Almost like an obsession.
Una obsesión con un crimen que él hizo. That's probably like the only reason why he would want all that information. Like he's trying to keep up with it. Or at least that's how I see it, pues.
I agree. Like, no matter how much someone is interested in a case, I feel like there's a line, right? And I feel like he for sure crossed it, and it is telling that he just knows more and is probably involved in this case.
I mean, I feel like he crossed that line in el momento que he said he knew where her body was. But once the investigators started connecting the dots, there was no denying that Christopher was the one responsible for Isabel's death.
Christopher Matthew Clements, de 41 años, fue arrestado on September 2018, and he was initially charged with 22 felonies in connections to Isabel's and Maribel's case.
And it blows my mind how these two cases were solved by pure coincidence. Fue casualidad que Christopher was arrested por otros delitos y de allí lo conectaron a los asesinatos.
Yeah, because like Christopher was brought in for another case, and because of that, it unraveled to the truth and like his connection to these two horrific crimes that he committed.
Y por eso decimos, and we always like to remind you all, like, uno nunca sabe lo que puede salir from the smallest bit of information or like the smallest lead that you might have. It could actually lead to solving the case.
All in all, I'm just glad that he is finally serving time y que por fin está fuera de las calles y que Isabel and Maribel have justice.
And I think also I feel for their families, you know, like Isabel was taken and from her own house, and the fact that people were blaming her dad, you know, like that must have been a lot para la familia. Y también de Maribel, you know, like they both lost their daughters.
Yeah. Again, I'm just really glad que they got answers. And as we say here on the podcast, la justicia tarda, pero llega.
And thank you so much to the person who requested this case. Como siempre les decimos, nos pueden mandar mensaje por Instagram si tienen un caso que les gustaría escuchar aquí en nuestro podcast. We always have our list going. So yeah, this was Isabel's case, which then led to Maribel's case, and which then led to us learning about the horrible person that Christopher was. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing to follow. But if it was, and if y'all have any questions, feel free to, again, ask us over on Instagram. Como siempre, vamos a poner las fotos de Isabel y de Maribel. So feel free to comment anything that you like or any questions, and we'll talk to y'all. Again, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, y ahí nos miramos para la próxima.